Hey guys, so today's video is not going to be that long, at least compared to my other videos. Now I did say that I had a surprise video essay coming out in December and this is it. And a lot of you are going to disagree with me on this, but I'm not here to please your opinion. A lot of movies are successes and some are failures. Some failures go on to become cult classics. One classic example is Iron Giant, which eventually became a full-time classic, but there are some that are still struggling to gain that status. Treasure Planet, Flushed Away, Swan Princess, Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron, you get the idea? But one film that constantly gets brought up which I don't seem to get is the 2012 DreamWorks film, Rise of the Guardians, a film that had a really great premise and so much potential, but ultimately ended up in disaster, becoming a box office bomb and immediately killing the studio's plans for a franchise, almost bankrupting the studio and causing a lot of financial damage for a bit, which ended their partnership with Paramount and landed them under a few other studios. But somehow over time people fell in love with this movie and still to this very day hail it as one of DreamWorks' best movies, and I'm here to say that I don't share that sentiment. In fact, quite the opposite. While I love the idea and concept for this movie and do think it's beautifully animated and has a stellar cast, the movie itself is a gigantic mess, and one of if not the worst movie I've ever seen from the studio, and don't think it deserves to be called underrated. But why do I think that? Well, let's talk about that. First of all and most importantly, the execution. Whereas the execution of these types of movies is usually well structured and well done, this movie is all over the place. It rushes by really fast to get to the next scene. Characters barely get any time to develop or to endear themselves to the audience. They mostly get an inkling of development, and then we're on to the next scene. It's like this movie is skimping over some really meaty parts that could be interesting and really flesh out the world and characters, but it doesn't seem interested in that, and because of that it makes the entire movie feel unsatisfying and like there's nothing to it. Other animated movies like The Incredibles would take time for us to really get to know the characters and give them time to talk to each other and express their feelings and emotions, which leads to the audience sympathizing with them and rooting for them to succeed. Many DreamWorks movies follow that similar formula, like Kung Fu Panda, Over the Hedge, Shrek, and even Madagascar. They all give us time to get to know the characters and understand their motivations and get behind them to accomplish their goals. But Rise of the Guardians is so busy and so occupied on keeping the audience engaged in the movie by thrusting them into action scene after action scene that they barely get any time to give the characters any depth or personality. By the time certain emotional scenes take place, you don't really feel anything because you don't really believe that these characters really formed a bond. The betrayal of Jack happens way too fast, and when the characters realize what he's done, you don't really buy it because these characters have barely had any time to know each other or get attached. It just feels like this scene is there because it's the cliché, and it has to be there to make the audience care, so it just feels like emotional manipulation. The action scenes themselves are okay, nothing terrible but nothing great either, certainly pale in comparison to the Kung Fu Panda action scenes, and even Madagascar 3 action scenes. Even Shrek and Over the Hedge have better action scenes, and the final battle is so over the top and bonkers, and it breaks the rules that were set up in the film. The Guardians show themselves to all the children in the city so they can defeat the villain, but isn't the whole idea of these guys is that they protect the world in secret, and they have to make sure they stay hidden? And all of a sudden they just flat out don't care if they're seen or not. I get that it's to reinstill belief in them from the children and all that, but surely there was a way to do that still didn't violate the code that these Guardians set up and wasn't so out of left field, because this world is supposed to be somewhat grounded and realistic even though it's literally about a group of holiday legends, but the way they set up the world and characters you'd think they'd try to make sure it's not too over the top and outlandish, but no. They just throw it all away because they probably just gave up at this point and they didn't come up with any other idea of how to do it, so they just said oh fuck and just let the world know the Guardians exist. I don't care. It's like they didn't care anymore, so they just threw their hands up and said screw it, let's just go all out, and that makes it impossible to buy and ruins the flow of the movie. The only thing that this movie did right besides the animation and cast is the main character and villain. The way the movie explores Jack Frost in Pitch Black is extremely well done and interesting. We start off not really knowing a lot about Jack Frost, but as the movie goes on we get to know about him bit by bit. He's fun, he's charismatic, he's a smart aleck. He's super cool, especially with his badass ice powers, and then we get to learn why he is the way he is and how he became Jack Frost. He got his powers trying to save his little sister, which is why he was chosen to be a guardian, and the struggle he goes through doing all of these things for people, yet no one ever seeing him or knowing that was him, is extremely heartbreaking and relatable. We've all been there when we do things to make people happy and no one ever notices us or even knows who we are, and we want so badly to be noticed and loved by others, but there's something in the way of that, whether it's physical or internal wise, is both a struggle a lot of people can understand and connect to. So for all the problems this movie has, this is one thing the movie nailed. Just wish we got this level of development for the rest of the Guardians. As for Pitch, he is great too. He serves as a great parallel to Jack. Like if he let his frustration of not being seen or believed get to him and lead him down a dark path, he could have become exactly like Pitch. If he became bitter and dark, you get why Pitch wants to believe Din, but the way he wants to be is for an entirely wrong reason. And while you sympathize with him, you also don't want him to win, and that besides his power and presence and personality truly makes him a great villain. And I do think he deserves the hype he gets as one of DreamWorks' best villains. The rest of the movie, though, I can't say the same for. So overall guys, I wanted to like Rise of the Guardians. It has a great idea, it has great animation, and a great protagonist and villain and cast. But the rest of the characters are underdeveloped. The scenes are way too rushed and the overall execution of the movie is messy. If you guys like this movie, I respect your opinion, but I just don't understand how anyone can call this movie underrated when this movie has so many problems that outright ruin the entire movie and keep it from being good. They aren't just little things like in Road to El Dorado or Treasure Planet, where some characters and ideas are a bit poorly executed or underdeveloped. These are huge glaring issues that are front and center and damage the movie immensely, and even the things it does right is not enough to save it from being bad. I really wish DreamWorks took their time with this movie to get it just right so that it could have been great. If they had done that, then I think it could have been a big hit and even spawned a great franchise. But instead they only focused on the elements that they wanted and ignored other important elements that are just as important to making a great movie. And that's what ultimately led to Rise of the Guardians becoming nothing more than a disappointment and a wasted opportunity. I get why people would like the idea and characters, but like I said, I don't think it deserves to be called underrated, and I think there are better films that go without notice that are more deserving of the fan base and respect that this film gets, and that is why I think Rise of the Guardians is not underrated. Anyways guys, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.